All right, I hereby call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Sunderland Selectboard and Finance Committees. The time is 6:33 p.m. You guys have quorum, I assume?
We do.
Wonderful.
4 for 4. We have 4
And they
people on
have
the finance committee. I'd like to
How about that?
welcome Ally to the finance committee.
Welcome, Ally. Thank you for joining us. We're looking forward to having you with us. All right. Before we get to our new business today, our first order of business is going to be to approve the minutes. We have minutes from our last two meetings, both the select board meeting from last time on 3/10, and then a joint finance committee select board meeting from 2/24. Do I have a motion to approve?
All right, I motion we approve the minutes for Select Board for 3/3 and Select Board and Finance from 2/24.
Perfect. Do we have a second?
Second?
All right, we have a motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 3-0. Thank you. Alrighty, on to new business. Our first order of new business tonight is going to be discuss state funding formula state funding formula impact on regional budget frontier. You want to give us a little bit of background on that?
Yes. So this was a question that Dylan brought up. Dylan will probably want to jump in. Dylan has dug into the formula pretty deeply to determine, to verify the numbers that were different. He had emailed me asking if I could look into that more, but he ended up also including Shelley at the school, and she went through meticulously, and we should probably share that email with the rest of both boards, and accounted for every student. As you're aware, there's an 8 in Conway. They kind of had a flip where they had 18 fewer students at the Frontier and about approximate 17 or so less students at the elementary school. So
More.
Other way around.
More, I'm sorry.
Less at Frontier and more at the elementary school.
Right. So what the impact of that for the town, for Sunderland, is that by having so many less students, it really made their percentage dive, and it made our percentage climb because we had significantly more students. So it was something nagging at me. I really appreciate Dylan diving into it and dissecting
So I didn't know
the
it was
issue.
on the agenda, but I did, as Becky mentioned, just kind of do some background. It just kind of gets started with the narrative we had heard was something like, well, Conway, had some wealthy people leave, and that actually is a myth. And so I did some work, and I have some things I can present, but there are no numbers that look wrong. They're really just context and educational. After we get to our main agenda, I'd be happy to just walk through it with everybody if you want, and if not, we don't need to do it.
Yeah, so the issue, or the situation where some wealthy people leave town or whatever, that's what brings down the town's income level, which changes the assessment per student. Is that correct?
No.
That didn't happen in Conway?
It is possible that a town could get less wealthy and that
Yeah.
could reduce, but there's a check. Your minimum contribution is the less of the income and property calculation or the foundation budget calculation times 82.5%. And for all the towns in this area, last year and this year, the foundation budget is the limiting factor, is the lower number. So as the incomes go up, down, and sideways,
Yeah.
it's part of the calculation, but it doesn't change it. The odd thing is actually Conway is the only town that got significantly wealthier year over year. It's actually, they didn't get less wealthy, they actually got a lot
Yeah.
more wealthy. Some of them got less, and Tiffany and Wade, they're about the same. I'm happy to go through this later or now,
Yeah,
but it
no,
doesn't
that's
impact the budget, so I didn't want to.
Yeah.
From my perspective, useful information, would love to hear more about it, but don't necessarily think we need to go over, if there's no impact to our budget, then,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes. I would have loved to find a smoking gun,
I
but,
didn't think we would find like a number that was wrong, but
Yeah.
it was helpful for me to understand how this works better, and I'd be happy to share that with this committee on our own time or in this joint committee if we have time, so.
Beautiful.
One question, this is based on the new, not the old Chapter 70 formula, the newer formula, as Gary said that. But the state adjusted the formula,
This is the formula for FY26 that went into the budget.
which is different than the old Chapter 70 formula. Okay.
But they're still talking about the chapter 7, like in the news today, they're talking about it again, so it's still in flux
It's
for
still
the future, but
coming.
not for us.
Okay.
They'll be working on it probably for 5 years
Yeah.
before any changes are really made.
Alrighty, thank you very much for doing that legwork. Really, really appreciate you getting a good grasp of that, because that's good for somebody in the town to know what that's going on with that. And I really appreciate
It's
you doing that.
interesting, it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I've done enough preliminary digging into it to know that unless I have a month to sit and stare at it, I'm just gonna scratch the surface, so.
Well, hopefully it can take them.
Alrighty, moving on to our next one. This is gonna be the review of our, full budgets, level funded and expanded services budgets, which you have in front of us. Thank you very much for that. Looks like the difference between the two is just shy of $76,000-ish. So $75,029, like that. Can you give us a quick little overview of what the difference is between the two budgets and where that money comes from?
Trying to see if these are, so the first area was the elections. It's halfway down the first page. You'll see the town clerk, and then right under there are elections. She had asked for $5,000 more dollars. She had asked for $12,300. No, I'm sorry, So I was able to reduce that request. Let me start again. I'm looking at the wrong line. This actually came down $10,000 from her original request. And she said the reason it was acceptable at this time is there's the limited amount of elections being held this year. She also came down $7,000 on wages. I think there were 4 elections last year, and there's only 1 this year, so she's in much better shape.
Why, I'm not, so that's off of both of these? That's off
Correct.
the level service?
I'm
Okay.
sorry, that's true. Okay, so let me start there. There were a few changes that people made before moving ahead.
Okay.
The highway superintendent had requested $20,000 extra dollars. And when he received the additional $120,000 in Chapter 90 money, I talked to him and he said he was willing not to move forward with his additional request of $20,000. That was part of his annual budget request, was to
That
add
again
20.
came off of both of these.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why the 8,300's there instead of the 1,330 or whatever it is.
And that was yes, both of those came off because they both said that they could live without those funds.
A quick question before we move on from that first page. I'm noticing on one of these sheets, we have the 27,000 for the town audit, and the other one, we only have 13,500. Was there a plan for paying the other 13,500 as something else?
Yes, I want to talk to the finance committee about potentially using free cash to pay that.
Okay.
As a bill of prior years, or FinCom reserve if we get to the end of June and they still haven't touched their reserves.
Okay.
So this is the audit for which year now, for 23?
23, yeah.
And it will definitely be done during FY '26? Either it's next FY '26?
It was done in FY '24. But
Oh,
I
so
couldn't,
it's all done, we
it
just
should have
haven't
been paid for, and it wasn't.
Okay, so then we should just pay for it out of this year's free
Yes.
cash reserve, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's more than half of what you have, so I would understand if you would want to hold on that until later in the year.
okay.
So the alternative to using free cash is to put it back in the budget.
But this is next year's budget for this year's expense for 2 years
Yeah,
ago.
it does-
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes, it makes,
doesn't
it doesn't,
matter, yeah.
logistically, it doesn't make sense, Ken.
Yeah,
And
but I didn't want to lose track of it and not pay
And
it.
it also, from a long-term perspective, it tweaks that this year's budget numbers to look $13,000 higher than they actually are. So when I'm looking at a 5-year, graph of where the budgets are going 2 years from now, I don't want this year to look $13,500 higher. if we can avoid that. I'd much rather it be handled either through free cash or through the reserve fund, or as a separate warrant article or something like that. Can we make the transfer if we do choose free cash, for example? Do we have to go through town meeting to do that, or is that something?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be a
But-
separate warrant
But the
article.
FinCom, we would not have to go through town.
Or the
meeting.
reserve fund, okay.
Or the reserve.
And when would we need to make that decision? Before town meeting, or is this something,
Yes, because you wouldn't want to hold off and not put it in and then have the finance committee end up with no money.
It would make sense to put it on, because then if we don't spend it, that's just gonna fall back into free cash.
yeah,
Yeah.
And we'd have to make a decision by the time we prepare the warrant.
yep,
So I don't know what date that is, but it's gotta be,
soon,
It's very
Soon.
quick.
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that makes total sense to me. I just wanted to talk it out because I saw that on one and not the other one. Okay, sorry, go ahead, you were talking about.
Okay, so those, I think those are the last of the items I took from both sides. Okay, then, going to, from expanded to level, the library,
Could we walk through the order on here? That would
Sure.
be way
Yeah.
easier to follow.
okay, sure. Okay, so then we'll start with,
Because right there under total select board, there's a difference, like a
That's the-
6%
That's
difference.
the 13.5 I was talking
Two out of
about
there.
for the
And then the
audit.
2,000 for
And
town
the-
council.
And so how are we, is it just the 20,000 was an over estimate?
the 20,000 was an increased estimate from last year, so.
Yeah,
You know, if we can try to live with the 18, it seems like it would help the overall effort.
yeah,
So I took back what was added.
okay.
Because our budget, actual budgets, none of the years have gone over 18, so that seems to make sense.
Well, their hourly rate though increased,
Right.
which is why,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right, but we budgeted 18,000 last year, and we only did 15. So,
So it might be tight, but I think this town is very responsible about their use of legal fees. There's nothing exaggerated, and the lawyers themselves are they expedite things. Things don't seem to drag on, so I think,
so on the flip side, if we were to go to 18,000 and halfway through next year, we had a particularly litigious year and we used that 18,000, what's our mechanism for appropriating more money at that point? Do we go to the FinCom and ask for reserve transfer? Okay,
yep,
okay,
during the year.
during the year, okay. Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
And then we have,
Yep. So the police, you took down the full-time officer wages to take off the new full-time officer, but then you added in some more part-time wages, is that correct?
yes.
Okay.
I added back 34,000 in part-time wages and
Okay.
removed 50,000 full-time wages.
Okay, great.
So we get, it's an extra $20,000 to get that incremental full-time this year. I think long-term it makes sense. The question is, could we wait a year, or do we want to ask for that? That's what I'm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, ideally, we'd have money for all the expanded stuff, because nothing in the expanded budget is honestly unreasonable or not needed. It all is needed. It's a question of, can the town actually afford to make it happen this year or not? Ideally, we will, but we'll see.
And I think he's lost another part-timer.
Yeah. And I do want to acknowledge that, you know, there is a minor crisis within the part-time police officer pool that we do have to address, whether it's this year or next year or the year after. I acknowledge that is the case, and, you know,
The reason he wants it is for security in the long term of coverage. You
Yeah.
don't have to find part-time people all the time.
because,
well,
yeah.
it's, part-time people are harder to find because of the training required now. They've changed that level of training that's necessary to be,
Yeah, and it's not just us. Lots of towns in the area are struggling to find qualified part-time officers, and a lot of times you get a part-time officer for a while, and then a couple years later, they take a full-time job in Berniston or
Right.
somewhere like that. And that's just, you know, part of the game. And it's also part of a larger question that the town has to ask ourselves about what kind of police coverage do we want to have in town? If we don't have full-time officers and we rely on part-time schedulers and we don't get the officers, there's gaps in coverage that potentially means that we have to, when you call 911, it gets routed to the state trooper barracks rather than being routed to us. There's a big discussion that could be had about how the town wants to handle that. But under our current budget, it doesn't, at least from my perspective, it doesn't make sense to make that increase this year, with the understanding that it would be a goal to do so next year.
Yeah, and if that happens, does the town get billed for the state police showing up?
I don't believe so.
No.
Part of the state
Yeah.
coverage?
Yep.
So, and that's what,
We do it all the time.
there is, no, and there is a legitimate question to be asked about, does a town like Sunderland need to have full-time officers 24/7, 365? I don't know if I have the answer to that, but that is a question to ask.
We've been having that debate for 25
Exactly.
years.
Right, there's a lot of towns right around us that do not have the 11 to 7 shifts or,
Yeah, Shutesbury, Leverett don't have them.
So again, it's a conversation we could have. I don't know we have necessarily the time or the appetite to do that between now and the budget. But maybe between now and next year's budget, we could have a bigger conversation in the town about
Just
that.
want to make sure we're not going to get charged extra if that happens.
No,
That's good.
no, yeah, that's good.
And have we gotten, or could we get some updated feedback from the chief just about if we were to go this route, like how, obviously he asked for it because he needs it. For myself, I want to support him long-term. I think he's doing the right thing here. think
Right,
it is
I
the
do too.
reality, but like, how much, how critical, I don't want to put him wrong-footed next week, even if we
Yeah.
know it's going to be harder next year. So I don't know if getting some feedback from him would be helpful, or how do you guys usually handle something like this?
And we could certainly, sorry,
From my conversations with him, the problem is happening now.
Yeah.
It happened last year, it's happening now. I was familiar with a couple of his part-timers. They're both, I think one is left. He's down to, I think, 3, maybe 4. He used to have 10 or 12. And shifts are going unfilled when he can't get people.
and so by not adding the full-time officer, that's gonna get worse. This year there'll be however many shifts we're not covered this year, it's gonna be more this coming year. But again, is that a problem that we necessarily need to fix if we're talking about is a 3 a.m. shift where the officer doesn't get called at all during that shift? I don't know. And to be honest, that's a thing I don't have the data in front of me from him about how many calls he gets during every shift and whatnot. Because if we were gonna have that conversation, that'd be a much bigger conversation to have. But again, I feel that for this budget, we simply just cannot afford another full-time officer this year. Yes. Any other discussion on the police item before we move on? Okay.
And I know Highway Department has regularly asked for another person, and they didn't this year just because they knew the state of the budget. But they will be back next year. I believe they've asked for a new person at least 2 other years.
yes, they
So
have.
how does I know that the formula money changed, and so he has more money this year than in the past. The wages aren't included in that, right?
Correct.
So-
There's nothing to do with wages.
But in theory, more of the other operating expenses could be shifted to that budget to free up money for another person. I'm not saying for this year necessarily, but if we wanted to reassess this next year and the money that he's getting from the state continues to be much higher than it had been in past years, we might be able to add the person without actually making a budget impact for the next
Yeah,
year.
it would mean lowering the materials line or something, and then increasing
Yeah.
the wages line, basically is what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
If this, it looks like the money that we're getting is gonna be at a higher level longer term, then we could look at how we, where the funding sources come and go to into the different buckets and move things around in order to be able to free up some money for another person. But anyways, he didn't even ask for it this year, because, he knows.
So does that mean he's paying overtime to people, or just not doing some of the jobs he wants to do?
It might.
So it's overtime, he hires seasonal people for plowing, things like that, where if he had another full-time person, obviously, that's another plowing, snow removal, that's always gonna be an overtime, well, not always, but, there's a good percentage of that that's overtime because snowstorms aren't planned between, business hours. But it's difficult for him to even find someone who can plow. Because it's not really a job you can say, oh, I'll do it in the evenings, I'll plow in the evenings, because not every snowstorm hits in the evening, and he really needs that extra body for being able to do. He hires seasonal help in the summer. Having that extra body would, possibly alleviate some of that. The thing is, seasonal help is usually a lower wage, unbenefited position. There's some there's some good for having that.
Most trying to join the.
But is the seasonal plus the overtime, is it still more than a person yet?
Not yet, no.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it might not.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's great, but it's
Right, but
not a whole person yet.
Right, and, we don't know what the future's gonna hold, right? At some point, it might be worthwhile, not this year, probably not for a few years, but at some point, we probably have to consider, do we want the highway department to take over lawn maintenance instead of contracting that out? Right now, we have a wonderful deal where, we have somebody dependable, reliable, able to do lawn maintenance, but is that gonna last forever? And that might be something that the highway department, and that comes with, maintenance, equipment, maintenance, it comes with a lot of stuff, but, at some point, we're gonna have to look at that too and see where the money's better spent, because I think some of the, lawn contracts we came up with, people that bid on them were extremely high, weren't they?
Yeah, we had a handful. Well, and part of it was that we asked the green question,
Yeah,
which was also part of our process, was finding out. We had multiple bids of, give us a bid for, just a general bid, give us a bid at 70% electric tools, give us a bid for, I think it was 90%. We had asked for a couple different bids, hoping to find somebody that was within what we could afford that would increase the percentage of electric usage of the, the tools for town. And what we found is the ones that came in with the bids with the high electric were substantially higher.
and they were traveling to
And
get
they were
here,
traveling
which
to- which is also
also
offsets the whole
increases.
point of having the electric in the first place, is if you use gas to get here from Chicopee, how's that save things?
Right, but then we can have some control over what we purchase for equipment at that point.
And and also just a lot more control over inflation proofness, not knowing that bid's not gonna come in higher next year because it's our own personal in-town people who do it, and we control that budget and we control how that goes. So anyways, that's a.
Right, it's a future
It's a
issue,
future issue.
but it's something we have to bear in mind at some point in the future, we need to.
Yeah.
I think there's one more year on the current contract, and we're spending about $20,000 a year on maintenance on that contract.
Yeah, it is.
So not counting the Veterans Memorial, which is the general building.
One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting 2 weeks ago was that the highway department's other money came in higher, so they cut their budget by a little, by 20,000.
Yeah.
And I asked if you could go back to George and see if you cut, because what they got was more than 20,000 more on the other side. So I wondered, did you have a conversation with him? Did he say no?
He's still not real happy about the first 20, so he did
Because
not
did
offer
you
any
get
additional
input?
money.
Did you get input on what things he could cut, like what things that money can be used for and what it can't?
Yeah, it can be used for materials and culverts, all kinds of stuff. It's very open. It can be used for
Mostly capital.
vehicles.
Capital mostly, and
capitals,
roads.
equipment, I don't think you can use it for maintenance,
No.
but you can use it to buy equipment and
So the road machinery item, for
Materials.
example, he could use the money from the other side to do that.
potentially. But see, that's repairs, so
Yeah, it
No,
wouldn't be.
that was
the road
repairs.
machinery, I believe, is really repairs.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's what
keeping
that one is.
it's usually keeping the equipment working.
It's hard to know how much to move into that money when it's the first year it's sort of come about.
Well, and it's
Well,
also,
it's chapter 90, straight up
Yeah.
chapter 90, so it's typically for roads, and you can have a certain length of road.
Yeah.
We
It's
should
pretty,
get
res-
it consistent.
it's pretty, yeah, it comes every year, but
I'm
sometimes,
saying, if we have a huge budget override, like, we can't keep a buffer in highway when we need it in everything else.
the flip side is that the cost to do the work has gone up dramatically over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And we have, the budget in previous years, the money from the state has been way too little. And so I'm hesitant to like claw back too much of his money
Yeah.
because that's bringing it up to where it should be, not, oh yeah, this is a ton of extra money. You know, a lot of work has been needed to be done in town that hasn't been done in town over the last bunch of years because we just haven't had the money to do it. And so I share the desire to try to, you know, take some of that back. I feel like the 20,000 is close to being as much as we can before it starts to hurt his ability to do the work he's trying to do.
Yeah, you kind of has to get a handle on what his full needs are. I think next year we could have a better discussion with
Yeah.
him about
yeah.
what is, because there might be projects that have been sitting for a
Right,
long
Yeah.
time.
catch-up work.
It's primarily supposed to be used for road resurfacing and that kind of stuff, typical capital.
And
but
you
not
can't use
anything.
it for engineering, which
You
could be
can.
a real benefit at some point if our other budgets are depleted. So you really want to keep an eye on that one. But I hear your point.
So it looks like the next item is the library, and that's the 7,000 that they had asked for the extended hours off the top, right?
I'm sorry, there's one broke for the new line, 160, county fee for Holy
Yeah, I
Services.
saw that
One
too.
It's not on the other, is that just something that got moved?
It was, it was deleted off of one.
You took it off,
Zeroed out most years.
It's not in level services.
you took it off level service and added it to the,
Yeah, well, I had put it in here because, but then I was thinking we didn't need it because of the, if he has the extra, chapter 90, but that, he can't pay for that with the chapter money. That's why I put it in.
But is
so
it-
does
is
it belong in the level service?
Correct.
That's county services for the technical stuff, for the
I
bidding?
don't think he had,
That must be
yes,
for the
it's for the
bidding.
bidding.
So he's
It's
gotta
for all
have
the
it, he's
bidding.
gotta have it. I mean,
Yeah.
that makes total sense, because otherwise he's paying an engineer to do
But
that.
I think it's under his it's regular expenses as well.
Okay.
That's why I took it out of one and not the other.
Well, if he can do it, then the level services without that, then fine. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure it says no.
Right,
Yep.
Oh, I see.
and I'll be sure to ask him, but that was, I didn't see it in his accounting for expenses, so I added it in, but I'll,
Sorry to interrupt you. Going on.
Yeah, no, it's
No, absolutely. I had missed that one, so I thank you for catching it. All right, so the library, that's the $7,000 for them asking to stay open an additional day.
yeah, it's
So that's the change in.
$7,658.
Okay, looks like that's the end of this page.
Are we
Over.
going level services on that, or?
We can discuss that in a second. I just want to go through the changes and then, you know,
The recreation coordinator, expanded to, it's about, it's $5,600 higher. This position was cut way back, during COVID. The new change for this year is the adoption of the baseball program.
Where's the recreation for
I'm sorry, it's in the
218.
last page,
Yeah, 218. yeah.
in, below the second yellow line.
218 or 221, depending on which one you're looking at.
Okay,
Under
so,
miscellaneous and reserve.
Yep.
so this position has been, it hasn't really come back from the COVID numbers, but the work has been there, and now the work is expanding significantly. Jim has done coordination of the big basketball tournament, which is going to bring in at least $3,000 to help with the baseball program.
It helps with the softball program too. This is
And
the first year
softball.
they're doing both, yeah.
Great. And so it helps with both programs. So I think, but the softball was already under the town before.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, I mean,
Sort of,
yeah.
but they're,
It's all four towns kind of work together on the softball, because we don't always have enough to field a Sunderland team.
Okay.
My question about the baseball though, so before, when Mark was running the Russo, how was it being paid for before?
He just did it.
Just did volunteer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically, what we're talking about is compensating somebody in town to do the work that was voluntarily done
So he
before.
did it all, okay.
Yeah.
I knew he did it all, I just thought he
And-
got something out of it.
Sort of a note on this, I have a little bit of a problem with that, with the classification of his salary being in the expanded versus level services thing, because what we're really talking about is level funding versus level services, because going up in money is level services in this, because we're losing functionality and we're having to pay to replace it. So, I have a little bit of a problem just classifying that as being a level services budget in that respect, because in order to maintain the services that we have right now, it's like if the school says it's gonna cost us $100,000 more to do the same thing we did last year, we don't tell them, too bad, cut that, without that being level funding versus level services. So I know it's a minutia thing, but it's kind of important to me on that. And just to speak on his behalf, even the $20,000 we're talking about is cheap for what that man does for the town. And so,
I mean, the 15, I agree, I'm not disagreeing.
Yep.
But the 1550 does include the COLA, like the increases in wage,
yeah.
it's not hours.
but also, you know,
Right.
we need to look at like a 10-year line, not just the last couple of years, because he dropped down and we're looking at restoratively bringing him back up to pre-COVID levels. So that particular line item, I have a hard time treating the same as the other ones, because it's not another ask. It's, hey, I'd like to actually be compensated for the extra work that you're expecting me to do going forward, or the town's gonna suffer.
But fiscal year 20 is pre-COVID.
Is it? It was 19, yep.
So I just, this whole, like, he went really down during COVID, then back up, he just was down, he was just too low all along. I don't think he was low.
Yes, but
I
it went,
think we got away with it because it was COVID.
yes, no, he was already too low to begin with.
Right, I'm just saying, it did go down during COVID, it just didn't go up.
I think if we look farther back, it did go down.
Yeah, but just not, I mean, it
Right,
might have
we
gone
don't
down with
see
some
it.
other budget, but it
Yeah.
didn't go down because of COVID.
Now,
Yeah,
again,
it might have gone down during an override year, but I'm just telling, just to
No,
tell
but
the story.
that's fair.
Because fiscal 20 is, you know, we're doing the budget and whatever.
But back to the point, if he's picking up additional things that he's doing that have been done by volunteer, like that's the delta of what he's doing, that is still level services that results in additional compensation.
Yeah, he's not coming to us saying, hey, I'd like to take on this new thing, I'd like to add this service to the town, I'd like to provide pickleball lessons or something like that. He's not doing that, he's saying, hey, in order to, or he's not even saying it, the town is saying, hey, we don't have this volunteer service anymore. If the town wants to continue to have baseball, which I certainly think we do, we have to pay someone to do that. So,
ironically, the numbers are way down for baseball,
Yeah.
for our town,
yeah.
for athletes, so.
Yeah.
But if
You know,
build
if they're
it,
down,
yeah,
do you know
yeah,
what the youth rec program is, numbers are down overall, or just?
They're down, yeah, we're down, Deerfield, they're all, the towns are down, but, I mean, people are going to Greenfield and Amherst instead. We had a gap year, we couldn't field a team, and so those kids went other places, and now we gotta bring them back, but they've already gone other places. So it's a challenge. I mean, if you build it, they will come. If we get him involved in paying him, maybe we can build a program back up again. So I think, the other thing I was gonna ask is like, I can't say the number, is it 5,600? Where's the 3,000 go that we raised from the basketball? Is that more for field maintenance, or is that for salary?
That doesn't go into this budget at all,
It's
that's,
just field maintenance.
that's the
It's field maintenance and, I mean, there's like tractor upkeep and like all that stuff and lawn mowing.
That's really the.
and one,
That's where all that goes into. That doesn't go into anything for him personally.
and the other part of it is whether or not we field teams or not, the field needs to be maintained, the bathroom needs to be maintained, the field, the work needs to be done whether we use it or not.
Yeah,
So-
twice a week or 3 times a week, it still has to
You know,
be.
even if we don't field the team this year, we can't just be like, okay, well, we're not gonna do any work on the fields and let them, you know, turn into a big overgrown mess. We still have to do, you know, our work on that. I mean,
It
yes.
needs work, and again, if you make a nice field, other people might come and rent it or use it, I mean, the town will use it more, I mean, it's a mess right now, and we have a cleanup coming up.
Building off of that comment, it's a mess. The second line item requested is to have a $6,000 more on the maintenance town recreation fields. It's 6,000 currently. On the expanded budget, I have it in at 12. Jim has, and I've gone back enough to understand that money had been allocated for the fields at least 1 or 2 times.
Years ago, yes.
Within the last 5 or 6 years, but the money ended up paying for the completion of other projects, and I think there's $457 left for Jim to use on the field. So he desperately needs to do applications to get the fields back up, and that's why he's requested this additional money to get the applications done
And I would put that in
to
level
potentially
service
reseed the,
as well. It's not an expansion, that's just trying to get it back to where it's supposed to be.
yeah, back to ground zero.
Do you know why he didn't spend the money in fiscal year '24?
He was asking for it all last year, and it was hard to find. Jeff couldn't find it. It had been used other places, hard to track. The accountants couldn't find it. Jim has documentation, I think, from 2023 of where it was assessed to go to the field, but it never ended up there again.
So the
Same
fiscal
thing
year
happened with
'24 just didn't happen,
Mhm.
even though,
Well, he used the almost $4,000. He didn't use every dime of it because he didn't have enough to do a reseeding project,
Correct.
and that's what he's hoping to do.
okay.
Is there not, I don't know much about this, but can CPA money be used as in this open space recreation, or this is so differentiated that it can't be used for that?
I don't believe maintenance is,
That's-
I don't know exactly what the project is or how that
Well,
language works. but-
CPA's changed their rules, so
Yeah.
they made it more generous in terms of what kind of projects can you use.
then we'll look into it.
I mean, the problem is that there's no rec committee, right? So historically, the rec committee got CPA money to do stuff,
Correct.
but without a rec committee, so there's a chicken and egg problem here,
Mhm.
right? There's other money that can be used, but only if someone gets their act together to request the money.
And having a recreation committee or recreation board was on Jim's list of things to talk about, so hopefully when the select board's ready, we can have some brainstorming about whether there should be a rec commission.
I mean, I think it would make sense to have one, kind of like the capital planning committee or other subcommittees like that, where there's a member of the select board, a member of finance committee, a member of CPA, a member of whoever, and,
I think there has been one, I'm just saying, I think he's just lost the people, like the finance committee goes up and
Yeah.
down. I don't think it's that there
Volunteers.
isn't one structurally, it's that he's
Volunteers.
lost people.
Well, there's
Or
two
we've lost
forms,
people.
there's
I don't
two
know.
forms one can take. You can do you can have park and recreation commissioners, or you can have a recreation committee that often would put together programs, different events, and support Jim, because there was a committee, but there's nobody active at this point, except for Jim. And I think, Jim's looking towards the future and thinking, it'd be good to share this information and have people that can keep things going if Jim ever decides,
When he hits about 104
Yeah,
and
when he-
decides to retire.
And he's sick of making the Granby to New Salem, the Sunderland.
Yeah, most information I get is because he's on a rant. But I mean,
Same.
yeah,
I think Joe and I get the same
Yeah,
information.
so my question, these fields do get used by Frontier Middle School. Do we get any money for that? The 7th and 8th grade soccer team plays here.
you're asking, I
Those
will,
annuals.
I will look it up. I don't know.
They use both fields.
Yeah, we do,
They use
yeah.
the field at the school and they use the field at
Right.
the town.
Is that just, I mean, I don't want to charge them, but it's just funny money passing around, but
do we know if they just use our fields, or do they also use fields in Deerfield and Whately and Conway? Because if all the towns are,
this soccer field is the only one regulation that I know for the 7th and 8th grade.
Yeah, the
Okay.
7th and 8th grade
They
use
can't
the
play in any other
Frontier
towns.
Field.
They're not
Okay,
big
okay.
enough.
and that's a very valid question then.
And Roots
No.
from FC Frontier
Right.
uses it too.
Yes.
And not necessarily in terms of compensation, but maybe we could encourage them to do a day of yard work or something like that, if we got a bunch of middle school students.
Yeah,
to
but I
come
bet
over
if
and do some
you,
work.
if you look into it, I bet you'll find that maybe baseball uses, again, I'm just throwing out,
Hurley,
Hurley and,
Right, there's some of that going on, yeah.
yeah, so probably everybody's
There's still a
getting,
bunch of 7th and 8th graders who could do yard work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like, we get a couple of rakes, a couple of shovels, and a bunch of 14-year-olds,
At the same time, just if that field needs maintenance and doesn't get done, they might not even be allowed to play in it. for regulation purposes. So I don't know if Frontier could help somehow, either with the maintenance aspect or seeding or something, but it's,
Mhm.
they have to use that, it's the only field they have for 7th and 8th grade.
Has Jim himself ever written a CPA grant?
Talked about it with me, but I don't know if he
I think
I'm
he always
sure
gets
he-
other people to do it. I mean, I think I can think of 3 or 4 off the top of my head historically, and there was always someone who did it.
Yeah.
But there's CPA money,
Mhm.
There's a lot of it.
and if it could be used towards that, like, we have a budget to close. I mean, I want to do all the things, but
But is it too late to apply for CPA money?
If I push off the timeline, which we need to get some feedback from him on what that would mean, right? It's,
I don't think we can do it. I was at the CPA meeting on Thursday night, and somebody else asked if they could put in a grant request, and she said it was too late for this year.
Yeah.
We would have to start in a new cycle.
We need the bare minimum taken care of in this budget, and then we need to make sure that for next year, we get some CPA grants written
Right.
out
And
there.
then he's got like a committee to
Yeah.
help support him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. Take the time.
All right, do we have any other changes on this one that we want to go through before we get to the bottom?
I believe that was it.
Yeah, the recreation coordinators, that one. The 6,000's that one, and everything else looks the same, go all the way down. Okay.
was there any changes on the revenue side that we should care about? No. I'm just like, you know.
The changes on revenue are just, I'm getting to a point where I believe that we should have at least 75, maybe $80,000 to go into cap stabilization.
Great.
And still trying to find a little more.
Yeah. But let's call it 70,000 for our purposes. We needed to put in 205-ish, something like that, which leaves us with 135 that we're missing just to get to 0 in the capital stabilization budget. So if we're looking at 135 out of the general stabilization fund to shore that one up, that still leaves us, we had what, 575 or something like that in that account?
Yep.
So that still leaves us like 440 in general stabilization, and then the 600 or so in free cash.
Yep.
So that's better than we were last time we talked.
Yes.
So thank you to the capital stabilization committee for doing some magic there. So if we're looking at 400,000, I know it says 369 here, but I'm gonna call it 400,000 because we might have to tweak a couple of the things like Jim's thing and whatnot. If we call the shortfall 400 and we're looking at having about $1 million between those two accounts, we could take 200 out of, or 150 out of general stabilization and 250 out of free cash, and we're balanced. I don't, again, I said this last time, I don't love dipping into our reserves quite so heavily, but they exist for years like this. This general stabilization is literally there so that when you have a year where all the things come together at once, you can do something about it and you're not just stuck. That being said, there are 2 items on this that are not on this that I would like to advocate for. One of those is the library, the other one is gym. I really think, and I think that we have some consensus here, that the gym item is not really a expanded services item. It's, we need to pay the man for the work that you're asking him to do. So at the very least, I'd like to put that money back in, because it doesn't seem fair to me to, and we don't hold any other departments to that standard. We don't tell the schools you have to do the same amount for the same money. We say, what's it gonna cost to do the same amount this year? And for gym, that's for where I'm going now. The other one's a library, and I know that it's a hard year, but it's $7,000, which is not a make or break amount of money, and it's increasing our offerings from the library by 25%. We're going from 4 days a week to 5 days a week. It's a huge increase in our offerings there, and again, if everyone else disagrees with me, I'm happy to say no, but
So
that's the one place I'd like to see the money go.
And I understand that thought, but unfortunately, I think my opinion, as much as I would like to see the library get it, is if we have to advocate for somebody's expanded budget, I would say it's the police departments, because that's public safety versus I mean, that's my opinion on it. I know it probably won't be a popular one, but I'd rather, if we have to put money into something, it to be the public safety versus another day open at the library, as much as that
No,
benefits.
and I hear you. For me, it's more just the increase on the police side is gonna be a lot bigger of an increase, so.
Yes,
you know.
yes, I agree.
But anyway, as I said, Jim's the one that I really feel strongly that we
Yes.
have to do that, because that's just,
That's level,
It's
that
level.
makes sense.
And that's really getting us back to level, hopefully.
Yeah.
Not even guaranteed getting back to level.
Right.
I mean, I wanna, and the Jim thing, so on the one hand, I feel like he's doing way too much and we need to pay him. That's absolutely true. But one of the reasons he's not doing, what he's doing too much is he hasn't recruited volunteers to do stuff.
I was gonna ask about that too. 'cause we
You know,
should,
he doesn't have a committee, like, has he asked Joe to be on the committee, has he asked Alan to be, like, get a committee together, write a grant, like,
I think
he's not organizing, right? So this part of his job, unfortunately, is to get other people to do the work,
I mean, there's also senior tax, with the senior tax credit.
you know?
Volunteer work, we have 8 spots allowed, 9 spots.
Has he ever used anybody?
I've asked him, you wanna get, you know how he, you know, I know.
He doesn't wanna, I'm, you know, on the one hand, he's doing too much,
But
but
there's senior tax board
yeah.
Yeah,
But it,
allowed it. We only have 3 people there right now, or 4, in this building, I think. I looked into it a little bit.
yeah, there are people that do it.
But we're
in
allotted
town hall, they,
8 or 9, I think. So he could put in and ask for a helper, but
but again, he's he's also commuting and spends tons of time here, and he's the one who brought up reactivating the committees and wanting help to do that. He's talked to people and he's been recruiting nonstop just to have all the coaching staff he has. I mean, so it's,
Well, I think that's the unfortunate reality is that the pool of willing volunteers for all aspects of municipal government has gone substantially downhill over the last 30 years, and particularly since COVID, largely because there's a lot of seniors who would have volunteered beforehand, but are kind of like, I don't really want to be around people right now. Everyone saw that happen, and so while I agree he could ask for more help, he could get more help, he also is dealing with less and less people who are willing to help him.
But
and
there
that's
has to
what we're
come
seeing
a point too, if he's gonna be responsible for getting coaches and referees and all that stuff, he can't also be expected to start building committees and all that, because that all takes time.
And again,
if
not
you're-
for $15,000 either.
Right, but once you start looking for coaches, referees, umpires, I don't know, I know some are basketball, some are baseball, but that in itself is a lot of time commitment, and then to start trying to build a committee on top of it and stuff, it really, I'm sure, becomes,
and he actively team builds too, from what I can tell. I mean, I don't, every time he walks in a building, if somebody walks through, he's talking to them about their kids. So it's, I have trouble faulting him for not organizing a new committee when the committee, whenever it was, has disappeared. I think he's,
It sounds
if
like
it
he
can
wants it.
happen, he wants it to happen. And if we can give him some help and advertising and help make that happen, that'd be great.
What was the extra for the police department? Was it 20,000?
20.
So, I mean, all three, if we did all three, it's about 33,000, right? Should keep us under the 400.
all 3, you need 20 plus 7.
20 plus 7 plus the 5 for Jim, right? Plus the 5 for Jim.
but then there was another 6
Or
for
the 6 for
field.
the fields, yeah, plus 6,
11.
plus 6 for fields, you're right.
On the piece on the library that I think I mentioned at the library trustees meetings tomorrow night, so we still haven't talked about the grant that was, they could help pay for those hours for 1 year. The problem is it doesn't pay after that, right? So this year, we happen to know that it's not, but we're committing to it for the long run. I mean, so I think the theme at the library was that if we start opening up Thursdays, for hours, quiet hours at the library that meet different communities' needs, then people are gonna be used to having the library open on Thursday, and it's a problem to take it away or whatever. So the library would rather have it in perpetuity rather than making a change that comes back and forth.
Well, I
This year it's
wonder-
paid for, but it's not next year,
So-
so it's, you know.
What I wonder is if we could make a gentleman's agreement with the library trustees that you put it in, you pay for it out of the grant this year with the understanding that, no guarantees are, of course, but that we treat it as level services next year. So that it comes in with the rest of the level services budget as it's a 5-day-a-week operation. Because what we'd be doing is we'd be giving them the confidence to make that change, not knowing that we aren't going to roll it back after a year of people enjoying it without it affecting this year's budget. Which would be basically the tantamount to us paying for it this year and then paying for it in coming years without actually having to pay for it this year.
That's a dangerous precedent.
It is.
It is.
And again, I think you kind of get the struggle with, too, again, and I am not anti-library at all. I am, we use that library and stuff, but again, it becomes hard when we have a town hall that's only open 4 days a week, that pretty much everybody in town gets an excise tax bill or a tax bill or something, marriage license, birth certificates. The town hall services every single person in town in one way or another, but we're gonna have a library open 5 days a week and a town hall only open 4. We've never brought back the
So it's
extra.
actually 6 instead of 7, because it's already open on Saturday.
Yeah,
So it's only 5 days a week, it's just not on Thursday.
yeah, so,
Right now.
I think the town hall has asked plenty of times too to, can we have the Fridays back, things like that, and that never really goes anywhere. Getting the town hall open more hours, so that's, I kind of struggle with it a little bit.
So that grant runs out June 30th, is that right? The library grant? Is there a grant now? Is there a grant?
They were awarded the grant, I don't think they accepted the grant.
Oh, I
The
see.
question is like, it was a $10,000 grant or $20,000 grant, they got the $10,000 grant, but the $20,000 grant included stuff they could have spent without opening the library, but the $10,000 grant only does the I can't remember, it was, again, tomorrow's the meeting.
Yeah,
I'll find out, we
understand.
literally haven't had a discussion about it, we've just
Okay.
we were dumped information, and there had been no
Okay.
discussion since we got it.
Okay.
We had some discussion before we got it, so I can anticipate, but I don't.
Well, it's
We
not
literally
open
haven't talked
now
about
on
it.
Thursdays, but it's gonna be open on Thursdays regardless, is what you're saying.
No.
Oh.
I'm saying they won't open on Thursdays if they can't keep it open probably into the future.
They don't want to
But don't.
make it just for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand, yeah. So if there's a gentleman's agreement, which is, I'm not recommending either.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, but that's the
What do you-
trustee's
what do you
decision,
think
the
of the
library
grant?
director's
Yeah.
decision, whatever.
But the
That's-
grant's secure, you're gonna get the grant, the library's gonna get the
I
grant.
think, I can look at the language.
I'm
Get
sure
it.
what they're gonna do
We
is.
come
they
back
don't-
next year and talk about it.
So, I mean, like I said, there's a
Right,
grant that
but
can be
it
used
wouldn't be the
for,
first time that, I mean, there's
there was
people
like a-
still knock on the door here
There
on
was
Fridays.
the grant was an autism grant, and it
Right.
came with some stuff that could make the library more autism friendly, but it also came with hours. And I think we were hoping we would at least get the one that could get this stuff, the structural stuff, and then not change the hours. But instead, we got just the hours, not the stuff, so they haven't had a discussion since then. I hope I'm not mischaracterizing it. Let me just see if I can find any. Again, we're not filing open meeting laws, we haven't discussed it, because our meeting is tomorrow, since that's the first time.
Can I ask a question about the rec salary? How did we land on that number? Like the amount of the increase? I don't recall, like 20 versus 18 or 22.
I think that was.
There's a
Jim's
number of
question.
hours.
It's just, okay, it's an hour increment at whatever
Time
it is.
is,
I mean, I'd say that's the one that I feel the most compelled that is level services and to try to make room for.
Yeah.
All of the other ones, I like all of them. I'd probably say police would be the next priority for a lot of the same reasons, it's public safety, even though it is more money than some of the other ones. And that's just kind of my initial feelings about those 3 or 4 items.
No, I mean, and in a different year, I don't think we've been having this discussion. Everything in here is reasonable. We're talking about a very small amount of money for a couple of very important things, and we would just be like, yeah, everything sounds great, let's move on with it. It's just unfortunately not that year for us to have that conversation.
So I mischaracterized it a little bit based on the one bit of information that we, the library director shared. I think the plan is to accept the grant, no matter what. Asking the select board and the finance committee to make the change permanent for FY '27, but all we can do is ask. I think that's what the director is encouraging. Again, the trustees haven't met about this.
Sure.
So, I mean, basically, my stance is if the library is comfortable going ahead with the grant, opening up for this year, I will try my best to fight for it next year, like I am right now, and that's the best I can do. But,
And I think what the director is gonna ask the trustees for is a meeting with the select board and the finance committee, so we can actually have that conversation later.
Yeah.
Could the library choose to accept the grant, create the autism-friendly hours, and just have them during some of the hours it's already open?
Exactly.
We already,
So the concern they had there is a couple of things, and what the library director said is, number one, you then have to go to existing programming and say, hey, either you need to move another day, or you need to be quiet, and there's a lot of programming that just can't be that quiet in the library. Adding a day and adding the autism thing means you have a whole clean slate where no one's in there already making noise, no one's in there, and so from day one, you don't have people, well, I've always come on Thursday and made a bunch of noise. You don't have to have that argument. It makes it a lot simpler. No, and I don't disagree. I'm just saying that was the reasoning that they gave us. I'm not saying that I subscribe to that, but that was the reasoning we were given, was it's easier to add an autism-friendly day on a day that doesn't already have noise.
So that means the 7658 goes away for this fiscal year,
Right.
but it'll be back next year.
What I'm hearing is,
there are some
Potentially.
sensory-friendly hours already, it's just this grant can only be used for sensory-friendly hours.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
So are they they're looking to expand their sensory friendly hours
Or
or full
move.
day? Because my question would also be like, what if I bring my loudmouth kids on a Thursday accidentally not knowing, like, what does that mean? Is that, like, not that my kids are loudmouth, but.
Oh, mine are when we bring them there.
I know, but
but
like.
my understanding is it's not like everyone needs to hush, be quiet kind of thing, as much as it is they don't go out of their way to plan anything in the building that day.
There's not storage
Like
time,
they don't
there's not
have
library doesn't
Mr.
need
Riccardi
one.
coming in with the birds of prey, for example.
Yeah, right.
That's a disruptive event. So
Yeah.
if a loud kid comes in, and hey, that's all part of the game. That's all part of the library experience. But
I feel
you
like
try to set it up to
there's a
be
lot
that
of-
way.
I mean, I know there's the new bathroom over there for the rec committee, but I do know a lot of times when there's practices and whatever, and sporting events, there's a lot of younger siblings and such that go to the library. So I think that Thursdays would be, an asset for that, but I don't know if that's I don't want to impact what their mission, what they're trying to do either.
But those would be after I think they were trying to do this in the morning, wasn't
In the
it?
morning?
In the
Okay.
morning, Thursday
Great.
mornings is the.
All right,
But
I'll take that back.
I think they have done some experimentation with sensory-friendly hours. I just don't know if there's any right now. They
Okay.
have done,
Yeah.
but I think they've run into problems because of programs.
Seems like to be continued once the
Yeah,
library.
the library does need to meet about this,
So it
so.
looks like it's in a good place. We're gonna fight like, she does for that and for the police officer for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and it sounds like we might be able to the library might be going ahead with it anyways, and then again, we can have that conversation next year.
Maybe that'd be another grant? That would be helpful.
So I guess really the question comes down to I think, and I don't want to speak to everyone, but I think we're in agreement that the gym money makes sense. I feel like that. You can argue if you want.
So Jim additionally had the field money as well.
At the very least, his pay, and we can talk about the 6,000, and maybe we go in the middle and we say, rather than going from 6 to 12, we go to 6 to 10, or 6 to 9, or something like that, meet in the middle, and give him a little bit more money, but not as much as he'd wanted, or something along those lines. And also, hopefully, keep track of the money better for him, so he has access to it.
Well, so I think before we talk about negotiating that $6,000 amount, I think we have to talk to Jim, because it almost sounds like that's what's happened in the past. They needed, again, fictitious numbers, but they've needed 5,000 to reseed and resurface the field, but they only get 2,000, so they
Right, so
can't
then-
do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why the money got reappropriated in the past, because he's like, I can't do anything with this amount of
Right,
money.
if
so
you-
we
if
need
he
to know
doesn't-
his actual
No, they just
hours.
took it. To complete our
Right, but
project.
I do think that's part of the problem, is not getting enough money to actually do the project, right? You can give him, if it costs $5,000 to do it and you're only gonna give him 2, he can't do what he needs to do.
Yep.
So, I think we probably need a firmer definition around that 6,000.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess my only thing there is just that the line item is going from 6 to 12, so that's a 100% increase. He may need the whole $6,000, but like, the reality is that he's asking for a 100% increase on a line item, and the town may not have $6,000 to give him for that, and we may have $3,000, and that's still 50% more than he got last year. So yes, I'd want to have a conversation with him about, like, if we don't give you the full 6, is that just wasting your time?
Right.
You know, if he has 2 $6,000 products and then, oh, we're going to do one of them because of this, then, you know, that doesn't help us at all. But if he can take the $4,600 he needs or whatever amount it is out of the $9,000 we give him and still have enough to do everything else, maybe a little bit leaner than he'd like, versus just telling him, no, sorry, you don't get anything, you get just the 6,000.
Is there something in the middle between the level services?
That's what I'm asking, is that
Well, could you articulate what those projects are and what his
Right.
priorities among them are, like we would for capital project requests? I know they're not that big, but like.
Yeah.
Right,
you know,
but then,
just to-
right, because if he tells you, you know, I can't do anything with less than 5,000, so we could take and put that 5,000 someplace else if he can't
yeah.
function with that, you know.
If it's 6 or 12, and we say we can't do 12, then maybe we say, okay, well, it's 6 this year, and next year we'll talk about the 12, and then you do the reseeding next year. That's a valid question to
It'd
ask.
also be nice for a town meeting if someone said, well, I'll help them at category 1 and buy so much when we're, you know, whatever, that's where people notice, that's where people ask the questions, to be able to say, look, we need a one-time reseeding. You know, that's not a 10-year, that's not a happen every year process, but it's just, it got declined, and reseeding cost $6,000.
Right.
So instead of, you know, $44,000 that, and then not reseeding, it's the extra 6 once, and then after that, it's not.
Right.
Yep.
Or whatever,
I
you know,
think
I feel
that's,
like we'd
I
have an
think
answer
that's
like
the,
that would be
I think
helpful.
that's the case.
Yeah.
Because that seeds a
He's trying
that
to
builds a mess,
reseed.
he's trying to reseed it, and I think that's
Yeah.
why.
And
Yeah.
and I think there's some areas he's worried about drainage that has to
Well,
be
that's the
done.
problem, you can't water over there, they're too close to the Connecticut River, so it has to be, you can't put permanent irrigation in there. 'Cause he's looked at that before. So there is
Yeah, they
tough-
did a study over there a few years ago to see what they
They're
could
trying
do.
to put in a well.
So-
To see what they could
Like,
do
my
about,
question is, could he use some, I mean, if worse came to worse, and we can't get the field taken care of, it's not playable, why can't we use the I mean, is Sunderland's field's not big enough? I mean, there's 2 fields that are pretty good, there's a recess one, that's near the pavilion, and then there's the main one that grassroots uses. If that was, I mean, could the town use that more and tell the other people that use it, sorry, town comes priority?
What's grassroots, I don't know what that.
It's
Just roots.
Roots, I'll just.
Roots,
yeah.
the Roots Frontier League,
Okay.
for travel soccer.
Yeah, no, I
And they use-
mean, our
they
town
use
soccer
it,
should
yeah.
definitely take advantage, you know, be in front of the rec leagues. I mean, our rec league should be ahead of,
Yeah, the fields are beautiful over there, but we're always using this one, so I don't
Yeah,
I don't know why that.
I know they help out on the fields over at the school. I know he's
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So let's put a pin on the $6,000 until we hear back from Jim on what that money actually means. Like, if does he need the full 6,000 or it's not worth it? If we give him 3 more and give him 9 instead of 12 this year, will that be enough? Reach out to him, please, and let us know. Putting that one on the side.
So one more, sorry.
Yep.
I don't know if you've done this, but would he go to Snow's, who's very generous, and they're right here in town now. We'll pay this much, can you fill in the rest? I mean, I don't know if we've approached them, you know, they do a lot of the
I
community.
think they're helping him out already.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Just making-
Now, my understanding is they've been very generous in general for a number of reasons. And yes, I mean, and that sort of rolls into our other conversation about volunteer hours in general. Like, there is, and one of the things we've talked about as a board, I'm not sure if the finance committee was involved in this because this was a couple months ago now. My company does a program where every employee gets the hours a year of volunteer time that they can get paid to go do. And so, like, the soup kitchen in Springfield will run a thing, and 50 of our employees will go down there and volunteer for a couple hours, getting paid to do so. There's opportunity for us to set up volunteer events in town that we can advertise to local businesses, we can advertise to my business and, other
Right.
members of the board's businesses. And, I can't make any guarantees, but pretty sure I could drum up 4 or 5 people from my office to come for a day to do work around
UMass
here.
does that too.
UMass does that. There's a lot of organizations that if you set up an official thing that people can get credit for, they can have a little thing signed off saying, yes, I
We
showed
can
up to
get
some
Chris to
thing.
come take pictures and write an article.
No pressure or anything like that. But like, if we were to set up some kind of a structured volunteer system, not just Jim finding random people to come help him, we could potentially solve some of these issues through volunteer hours. So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'd rather come volunteer here in Sunderland than,
Yeah.
drive out to Worcester to, do a volunteer event there because, that's where the closest one is for me.
I'm just saying, it looks like Hurley, he got CPA money
mhm.
and in Whaley, so it can be used. So if we can figure that out.
For like a full
Yep.
reseat or something,
It
yeah.
was rehabilitation, I feel like
Rehabilitation.
that's the right word.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm not, there's not details like that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
rehabilitation sounds like it needed a lot of work. That's what that means to me.
So I think we have a lot of good discussions for next year's budget for the rec department in terms of getting the committee back up and going so that we can actually support him a little bit. Again, I'd like to have us just sort of put that $6,000 question on hold for now because until we get more information, we can't really do anything about it. That being said, speak now if you do disagree on Jim getting his hour increase because again, I'm classifying everyone in this room as being in agreement and I just want to make sure that we're all on that same page. So not hearing anyone saying otherwise. So going forward, Becky, please include Jim's as level services in future budgets.
great.
And feel free to tell Jim that we're going that direction. 'cause
And-
he deserves
And
it.
not to give him more work to do, but it would be really helpful if he had come and gave us a budget presentation like everyone else does. I don't know if he has time for that, but I know he's busy, but like having 10, 20 minutes with Jim to ask those questions would have been nice. We didn't have that with, we had that with the police, we had that with other people, we didn't have
And
that
he
with
came
them.
and presented to me, and I didn't even.
That's helpful, but
Yeah, but it didn't give you what you needed
Right.
exactly. The other issue that he has is he was supposed to get a new shed when the shed was, the kayak shed was built. The old recreation shed is, I guess, falling down. And he's been asking, it's been funded also, but that money has also disappeared.
well, that was CPA.
That was.
That
And
hasn't
it was
disappeared.
used, it did disappear. It was used, there were cost overruns on the kayak shed and the bathrooms, and his piece was consumed to complete the other projects.
This is not making me want to advocate for the extra 6,000. It's multiple disappearing fund situations.
Well, he would like, I mean,
I think the
you got
overruns
the
were on the
6,000
bathrooms, which were both rec and kayak, right?
no.
Those
No,
park,
it
those
was
weren't park stuff, were they?
They
Those
were-
park
it was-
grants? Those were CPA or park grants or both?
CPA.
CPA, okay.
I don't know what the tax, but.
So, but to that point, him needing the shed, that's something that can either be handled as a CPA request or as a capital planning committee request
CPA,
next year.
certainly a good CPA request.
Because I mean, really, that's a capital expense that we're talking about. And if we can do it with CPA money, great, but if not,
I guess
No,
I
you
just
got one
don't
for that.
understand how, if that money was appropriated through CPA, that it,
It speaks to the old way the accounting had been done.
and my understanding
And it
is,
should not be done that
Yeah.
way anymore, because projects that are funded, especially by town meeting approval, shouldn't be shifting into other projects.
Right.
But at this point, they have, and we have to start fresh and make sure.
all we could do is do right going forward, I
Yeah.
guess.
yeah. So yeah, let's talk to Jim about next year putting in a CPA request or a capital request for that structure.
Okay.
Either a repair to the existing structure or an upgrade. In fact, we might even be able to get like a prefab thing, kind of, and just drop it there. So let's have a conversation with Jim about, obviously he didn't ask for it this year and we don't have money for it this year, but for future years, I think that I know the building he's talking about. I did a bunch of maintenance when I was coaching one of the baseball teams, and even 5 years ago it was already starting to fall apart, so,
Yep,
yeah.
so we can't use it for storage anymore because it leaks.
Yes, it leaks and it's tilted. It's dangerous.
Can I just ask this? I mean, I know we talked about, we've got the 150 general stabilization, 250 free cash. What's left in free cash if we use the 250?
350 would be left.
350.
There's just around 600 total.
It's just over
Would be
600.
left.
Yeah.
So, okay, I mean, and then the only other question I had was, for police department, with losing the part-timer, what are we looking at this year if we do this the way we're talking about? What kind of loss hours are we gonna see? Like, what kind of loss of coverage? Maybe, I don't know. if there's-
Right, that's what we need to get the answer
So,
from
and-
Eric on.
Okay,
And the short answer is that he can't tell you which days or which whatever,
Yeah.
because it's not scheduled shift as much as it's, an officer calls out.
Yeah.
He would normally go to the part-timer pool to cover that shift. He can't, and that shift goes and my understanding is he's never scheduling an open shift.
Yeah.
He's just not able to react to the loss of someone out sick or.
Well, no, I don't know. So I think we probably need clarification on that because I was under the impression that with this very reduced number of part-timers now,
you can't,
that he can't even fill all the scheduled shifts.
I don't believe that's the case, but we
You're
can certainly
right.
get
I
the
believe
confirmation.
that is the case. I think Crystal's right.
You think he's right?
I don't think it's
Right.
what he told us, but maybe it's all, that's not, I don't think what he told us when he was here.
So my understanding was that.
He was
the-
anticipating that
My
problem.
understanding is that all of the shifts are covered by full-time officers as sort of like if they showed up every day of the year, didn't take vacation, didn't take sick time, was never out, the main shift chunks are covered by full-time officers, is my understanding.
No.
Well,
there-
let's hear from him.
Yeah.
yeah.
We could argue all day long with
Yeah,
that.
but only just because I see some of the part-time officers, out and about in town.
And he will be back on Wednesday.
Yeah. So yeah, we can clarification on the level of impact it's currently having on day-to-day operations and a clarification on whether or not it's just the emergency ones or if it's like, oh yeah, no, I know that every month I've got 4 shifts that I just can't fill, period. That'd be great to know that. But I guess sort of back to the original thing about the money, we are in a position where we can cover either of these budgets with general stabilization and free cash. Now, if we go with the higher one, we're in a lot worse position going into next year and further future years and whatnot. But we're not in a position where we have no options. We have options. And so what I'm hearing from the committee is we give Jim his pay bump, but not the $6,000 until we hear a better explanation for why. And maybe we just say, sorry, this is not the year, but next year, we'll apply for some CPA grant on your behalf or something along those lines. We tell the library, please fund it this year, and we'll try our best to fund it next year, and hope that they take that. And then I guess the real question is the police. That's the one that we all seem to be on. So from my perspective, we already increased a new full-time officer. I think it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe something like that. And not that that's like, we already gotten one. And I understand the issue with the part-timers. But I just don't know whether we can justify that kind of an increase this year or not, especially because it would be like the only department we're giving an increase. All of the rest of our departments were saying no, level funding, or level services, and then we'd have one department we were telling otherwise. And I know it's because it's trying to shore up services that we currently are offering. I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Again, it all depends on what Eric comes back with for the answer, because technically it could be level services if he can't even find
Yep.
part-timers to cover shifts. And,
But it's also true that we're an incredibly safe town, right? Or we have a safe police as a backup, it's a different situation, right? Like, we want public safety, we have public safety. I'd like to have really good jobs and stability with our public safety, but we don't, it's not like we have a crime spree or, we're good. We have a nice, safe, happy, lovely town. I don't wanna say that too loud because then people will move here, but,
I mean, for me, one of my big concerns is if we don't have an in-town officer on the streets, let's be honest, on 116 at 2 o'clock in the morning, people are gonna fly down 116 when they figure out that there's no officer on those nights. I mean, maybe they won't figure that out. I don't know, maybe that's a big worry for nothing, but just, there's not like the state troops are gonna station someone in town on those days. It just means that if there's a problem, we call and an officer gets sent from Northampton Barracks to Sunderland. And I don't know about you, but like if there's an intruder in my house or something like that, I don't want it to take 25 minutes for an officer to get to my house. You know, like I do get that part of it, is that we aren't just talking about, oh yeah, no problem, the state trooper who, you know, already lives in town is gonna do it. No, it would be dispatch out of Northampton, so.
I mean, the other reality is that people are going to bed earlier. Remember this from the call that he gave us? Like, you know, the calls are down, the people go to sleep earlier than they used to.
Right, but look at the biggest spike on it, wasn't it 6 AM?
I mean,
And there's gonna be nobody on
right, they're
it.
getting up earlier at 6, so,
Right,
but
but
the
there's-
whole day, so it's not 2 AM that we're worried about, it's 6 AM.
Yeah.
Where there's nobody on duty.
Right, but we don't have to have anybody on midnight anymore, because they're down.
Well, again, he has to make those
He's gotta
decisions
figure
about
that
where
out.
he places
Yeah.
But
resources,
you
that's
still
what-
have the O's is still gonna be open at midnight, and those things won't go
And
away.
college people.
Yep.
It's also the chicken and egg, like, because we have good visible cars going around on their shifts, does that prevent people
Correct.
trying to do
Right,
things
right.
illegal? If you lose some of that and the visibility, then
Yeah.
these
Oh,
things go.
yeah.
Now, the other thing was saying, 2 years ago, right, it was 2 years ago, we hired a full, and he had a pool of 9 or 10 part-timers in it.
Right.
Now his pool's down to 3 or 4.
Yep.
So that's a concern, you know. But he also said if we hire full-time, doesn't mean that he thinks we have full-time would stay longer, that they could leave and go to another town too.
So, I guess here's another question is, can we ask him to be more balancing about it? Like, he's asking for $50,000 more for an officer, and he's only reducing the part-time by $30,000.
Right.
Can we say, sure, you can have the $50,000 for full-time, but we're gonna reduce the part-time by $50,000, or $48,000, or $45,000, because then you're still talking about more hours in town with a full-timer plus retaining more of those part-time hours.
Probably gets more hours out of part-timers, but yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, we
but,
can do the change budget neutral.
Yeah, budget.
or even not,
Yeah.
Close to budget.
or closer,
But
you know,
closer
right now it's
budget.
$20,000 difference,
I
if
mean,
he
health
can bring it
insurance,
down to
whatever,
10.
but like, yeah, it'd be better.
I mean, I would be much feel much better about giving that increase if it was more of a lateral move, you know, availability of the potential workforce wise than it is about increasing the budget by $20,000.
And you still will have benefits going with that officer, and the part-timer probably didn't.
Yes, so we know there's gonna be some increase, but there might be room to be able to split that increase somewhere in the middle, and, you know, claw a little bit of that part-time money back to make it more palatable. So that's also an Eric question for when he gets back. So I think the last two things we have to discuss in terms of which budget items we're gonna push for are both waiting on hearing back from Jim and hearing back from the chief. Both of those together are, what, like $25,000-ish between the two? And so, basically, one of the, free cash is either gonna be $25,000 more or less, but one or the other is gonna be coming out of the free cash line, most likely. So let's take a minute to discuss the comfort level of the two boards in the numbers I put out earlier for free cash and general stabilization. So 150 out of general stabilization, 250 out of free cash, and that's plus or minus a little bit depending on how things shake out. But if you take the 375-ish and you add the 25 in for those two items, we're looking at right around 400.
What are the percentage of those, for those funds? 150, what percent is that of what's there?
So we have 575 in general stabilization and 600 in free cash. So we just call it 600 each.
What's the 25%?
25% of general stabilization and shy of half of free cash, yeah.
What's been the run rate on free cash usage in the budget the last few years?
Around 250, 213, around,
Yeah,
Free
a
cash
very similar
usage is
number.
kind of
Standard.
standard, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, that's not the right word.
The
but
big difference is the general
the
stabilization.
extra stabilization.
And to be clear, in many of the past years, we've not just put 250 out of free cash into our budget, but we've also put money into general stabilization and
Yeah.
into capital stabilization, where this year, it's, you know, going the other direction. That being said, I mean, we're in a much better position than I thought we were gonna be 6 months ago when we were first starting to, or 3 months ago, when we first started looking at this. We have a budget that we can, you know, if we didn't want to do any more work, we could be like, all right, we're done and leave, but like, you know, so I feel good about that.
So, question for Becky. When the highway department needs extra money for wages, snow removal, salt, all that stuff every year, what fund does that come out of?
It's part of closing, the recap, so.
But like when George sends us the letter mid-year
Yeah.
saying he needs X number of dollars, does that come out of free cash? Does that come?
Potentially, yeah. Most basically it
Right.
does, because free cash is
Yeah.
the number that's manipulated when you're closing the recap.
So we also probably should look at what is our average every year for those requests coming to get money out of free cash for things like,
Well, it comes out before they set the free cash number. So it's part of the internal
So
balancing.
this year's money is gonna affect next year's free cash amount, not this year's free cash amount.
right.
So,
So what happens if, so, right, I understand that. That's why I'm asking, because I don't want to put
Yeah,
something so low that there's the potential that horrible winter storms, more PFAS issue, all these things that could happen,
yeah.
you know, could really
I mean,
knock us down. We've got to have some type of
Yeah.
idea of typically, you know, we have this budget that we get every year that,
I mean, we're leaving 350 in free cash if we do it this way.
Yeah.
And we haven't left that much in free cash in past
Well,
years. We've
there's
left,
one more question on that. I think last year, the OPEB of $50,000 was funded by free cash.
Mhm.
Feelings on that? Do you
We've
want to
done
do
that
that
every year
again?
for as
Yeah.
long as I've been aware.
Because it just, it was less than 50,000, until,
My understanding is that
it
we
just
do,
went to 50 last year.
yeah, my understanding is that we do that because we know that if we don't spend that, it rolls back into the free cash and I know, I mean, we've done it at least the last 3 years. I'm
but
pretty
that's
sure.
the retirement stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other, well, it's not really retirement, but it's
Other
it's
benefits.
other benefits for
Yeah.
the health insurance.
Right, and for
To
some
address-
reason, we did up that a few years ago because there was some anticipated,
I don't remember the reasoning
But
behind
it makes sense, I think 50,000 was a better level to be
Yeah.
at, because you haven't yet hit 500,000, you should this year. And that's when you start making real money,
Mhm.
because then the investing can change and be more aggressive, and
Okay.
so that's a good thing.
So if we put 250 into the budget, 50 into OPEB,
Okay.
we would have still 300 left over. Man, it would be a really, really horrible year if the highway department and all other things was over $300,000. And that would, you know,
Well, and the highway department has another source of funding that went up this year compared to last year.
yeah.
Yes, but it can't be
But
used
but
for,
they
but
don't
it
use
can't be
it
used for
Operating-
wages and
operating.
stuff.
it can't be used
No, it
for.
can't be for overtime and wages, but it can be used for all the extra ice and gas and stuff like that.
We're not talking necessarily about balancing the budget as much as about what happens if next winter we have 3 feet of snow every week for the entire winter,
And
and
not
he's
labor.
paying and paying and paying and paying and paying for all these plow trucks to go do the work. He's gonna run out of money. The question is, we need to leave enough money in the account so that if he runs out of money, we have money to give him.
Yeah.
I still feel $300,000
No.
is sufficient for that.
No, I feel it's sufficient for that, but that just
Even in a
historically,
village, yeah.
you know, we gotta look at the potential for the perfect storm, right? Over the last 5 years, what are the things that have been hit that we've had to pay out? And if every one of those hit all in 1 year, are we gonna be okay?
My fear too is we may see less federal aid money for disasters type stuff, so
Well,
that's
yeah.
another thing to worry about.
And the money, the COVID money we got is also something that we need to keep in mind, is that for the last X number of years, the requests we've gotten for overages that you're asking about did not include anything they came to us and asked us for the COVID money for. And so the last 5 years might not be a good representation of how much we actually need to have in reserve if we
Yeah.
don't have the ARPA money sitting there
Yeah.
for other things. So I share your concerns. I still feel like 300 is, I mean, a very robust amount of free cash for a town our size.
And some years you haven't had that much free cash
Yeah.
certified.
So, I mean, worst case, we did go over 100,000. We don't go bankrupt, we would take a loan out, right, and try to pay it back as quickly as possible.
Or we would call a special town meeting and
Try
make a transfer out of the general stabilization fund, or, I don't know, something.
There are other, it's
Yeah.
not dire straits.
Right, no, it's not dire straits, I just don't wanna see,
And then the next year, we don't have it, so we have to do an override
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something, right? Like, that's not nothing,
But
but
when's the next time, I hate to ask, but real estate's reassessed or assessed again? Do we do it every 5 years?
wasn't it just done a year or so
Is that
ago?
just that?
Yeah, I
Most
think,
recent, yeah.
Oh, and then we got is that why last year we got some money back or things went down? What?
So, the tax rate went down because your property value went up.
Right.
And you can only, yeah, there's gotta be that.
And also, on a side note, it also went down because we didn't collect the capital stabilization money last year. That was the big thing, and that's partially why we're in this situation, is because 409,000 wasn't, so people's bills went down way more than they should have this last year. And so, but the other part that I think you might be touching on a little bit is that our valuation as a town went down as well because of a appellate housing case that settled that caused us to have to drop our evaluation of the apartment complexes by many millions of dollars. And so, yes, that is in play. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Great.
can I ask a question about so we are really close to being where we're gonna have warrant articles, right? But we're not, first of all, we're not right there. Does the finance committee agree to the warrant articles, or do we just vote on them? Like, so for the next steps, do we all have to get together one more time to do the final budget? Or do you do the final budget and we vote on whether we agree with you?
So, at some point, we have to get that vote whether select board recommends,
Right.
you know,
Right,
and
but
finance
my point
committee.
is, do you guys then finish the budget with the input that we've given you now, and then we vote on it? Or do we talk one more time once we have those two other pieces of information, and then go off and do our vote?
I think we probably can do it either way, but I would.
Last year we went off to the library on a Thursday, no, just kidding, on a Wednesday night. And we sat there for like 3 hours. Aaron was lovely, he kept it open, and we voted on all the warrants separately on our own.
Yeah.
Which we will have to do as well.
So you guys all do the warrants.
Do we do it
So
first
at this
and then do
point, you guys are we're all on the same page-ish enough,
Mhm.
that you guys are gonna prepare the budget, and then we just vote on it. So.
With
Whether
just
you
a couple of-
recommend or not.
Yeah,
Right.
with just a couple of items that we're waiting to settle. That's my understanding of how we're gonna go ahead and do it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it together, we could do it separate, it doesn't matter.
Right,
the
I'd
only
like
thing
to
that
do
matters
that.
would be if you wanted to be part of that final conversation about the police and the fields.
The only reason I like being separate, no offense, it just felt like we were voting without any influence.
Yeah, no,
You know,
that's-
It made sense, it was
I
an
think
extra
for the
night.
vote, that
It
makes
hasn't been done-
perfect
Like, one year I
sense.
did it with you, and then
Yeah.
last year we did it separate, and it really, it took some time, but it was, we flowed through it pretty
Well,
quick.
Yeah.
And no offense, but I don't need to sit and watch you guys do that.
I know,
You know, like,
same way, yeah.
I got things to do.
It might be good to get back together on those two items.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
on that note, tentatively, we have 2 weeks from today scheduled as our next finance, and it's on the agenda as being, that's our next meeting. I would like to keep that meeting
Yeah.
with everyone's permission. And by that time, we should have the answers to the last couple of questions and be able to make an agreement as to what you guys are voting on and what we're voting on, and then we can go our separate ways and do those things, and then,
So when do they have to be done by, is it a week before the town meeting, or 2 weeks? When do we have to have
It's,
that's what I'm saying, is that time. I guess if we all do that one more time on the 7th,
The 20th is the meeting, right?
So we need to meet the week of the 7th.
right, so then after, we all meet the 7th, and then also that week, the finance committee meets separately.
you'd wanna meet that Wednesday or something like that.
Wednesday.
to-
26th.
And when do you have to know how the votes were made? That's it. How much prior to the 20th?
well, I mean,
Well,
you
we
know,
can't post until that information is recorded on the warrant. You have to list what the recommendations are.
Okay.
Is that,
So,
I feel like we've had town meetings where that wasn't there, and then we added it after the meeting, when the meeting was going on. Like, the votes of the finance committee on something wasn't always already ahead of time.
it depends on your bylaw. In Shutesbury, it was required that the recommendations were
I might
on
be
the
making that
the
up.
posted warrant. I'll double check your bylaw.
If we get you our votes on the 9th, is that enough time for you to
Yeah,
put
that's
one together with that information?
I think so.
Because they gotta get printed. I mean, we'll probably
Right,
ask
'cause they
Wendy.
gotta get-
We'll probably ask Wendy, she'll know, she'll tell.
They gotta
Well, I
get
have the
printed and
calendar she gave
posted.
me.
Circle back if that
Yeah.
Yeah.
changes, but let's
Yeah.
tentatively say the 9th for us to meet.
So is that good for the rest of the finance committee?
So then when would we do? We'd be here on the 7th with them, would we vote that
On
night?
Monday, the 7th.
Yeah, we might as well. I
We'll
mean,
do this
it's
again,
not
it's
all
after
the
we
time.
got all these. And then on
So at that point, we don't have
Wednesday,
anything to discuss it anymore, it's really them discussing stuff, it's us to say, yes, we recommend this.
The reason we ended up there is because Sarah didn't have a key for here. We couldn't come, we couldn't get in, so we could go over there. But it is.
I'll figure it out.
It has to be posted, it's public, so we have to let.
I'll be
them know.
posted.
So if you could post,
So,
so what time do we wanna meet? 6:30 is what we're used
If you
to?
get pizza, we could, you know.
What day of the week is that?
That's Wednesday the 9th.
Good.
Joe really wants pizza.
He's got an idea.
That's what we get.
And
Another year, next year maybe.
we need to figure out, we need to post where it is, right?
Yeah.
And is it also on Zoom?
It doesn't-
Finance committee doesn't have to be on Zoom,
No,
right?
it's not.
We don't need owl and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'll probably be here. You go.
But finance committee, I don't think we have to have.
We can do this
Right.
later. Let's
Yeah.
take that
Okay.
offline,
Yeah.
sort that out.
Yep.
You can meet at town hall.
All right, so it sounds like you guys will settle out the details of that, but we have a plan for our next meeting with you and also your meeting to solve that. So at this time, I'm going to close new business because I see, oh,
Sorry.
Yes.
Last time we met, we talked about what happens if the town somehow voted down the senior center, because we didn't know what happens, right? If one town says no, the other town says
Right.
yes, do we?
That's right. No, I haven't found that
Okay.
out.
okay.
So I just.
And that's the region with 3 towns, Whately, Deerfield, and Sunderland.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good point. So we might also have more information for our next one on that one. All right, so that's all of our new business for today. Would the finance committee like to entertain a motion to adjourn before we go into our little bit of housekeeping stuff that we gotta do?
I will entertain that kind of motion.
So moved.
Finance committee.
Joe's gonna get
All in favor?
Aye.
That was your first vote. I said he might not vote tonight.
I know.
Thank you.
But voted to adjourn.
Thank you guys all for your
Thanks.
help. We really appreciate all the hard work. I really appreciate you digging into those
We can run
money.
through that in a couple weeks if you want. if
That'd be
that's
great.
a shorter meeting.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I am very interested in that information, so I appreciate it. All right, up to old business. We have select board updates. I don't have anything this week. Crystal, do you have anything you want
I
to
got nothing.
All right, beautiful. That was fast. Town minister updates. Anything from you, Becky?
She did
There
it.
was one, give me just 1 second. Just want to double check. Okay, so George stopped by my office and let me know, and he wanted the public to know that Eversource is going to be doing some very extensive line and work across Sunderland. They're extending lines coming out of Leverett, and
I believe they're upgrading the transmission towers, right? Yeah, we've been briefed on this one before. Yes.
Okay. Well, George wanted the public to be aware. He got a call. I believe it coming off of Fall Road
Yep.
to start with, and then moving into Montague. And he's been getting at least a couple calls, concerned about the tree cutting that's being done. And it's being done to open up the roads and keep the town from power outages. And so he just wants the public to be aware of why Eversource is taking this action, and that they'll be here for a few months.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And now we know also, so when people call us and ask us, we'll have answers for them as well.
And Chris is gonna put it in the paper for us, so.
Anything else, Becky?
Not tonight.
Wonderful. All right, that's all of our old business. We don't have any correspondence today for public comment. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to ask, or?
No, maybe could I just speak at the budget, or
No.
can you email me the budget?
I can email.
Yes.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
I figured just kind of surface level stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are kind of having the toughest budget here out of the 4 towns.
It seems like every time we talk to one of our intertown departments, they're like, "Hey, everyone's doing great this year except for Sunderland." You know, so it has been a perfect storm year in a lot of ways. But it's that, you know, we're in a position where we're actually looking pretty good to get the budget
Yeah,
closed.
you're not
so.
cutting anything, I think.
Yeah. And considering the cuts that I'm seeing in towns around this area, Northampton especially,
Yeah, especially in schools.
that is a miracle that we are not cutting things.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the hard work. I want to say this publicly of all of our town departments to be fiscally responsible, to make reasonable requests, and to a bunch of departments, as I mentioned, have gone back to their numbers and found more money that they can cut for us. So without having to make cuts to services or employees or whatnot. So it'd be great.
And I really appreciate the superintendent. I think Darius and Shelley worked really hard and were considerate of our situation.
And the school committee as well. The school committee really,
Yes.
you know, understands our position and worked really hard to all of them to come together to come bring us a budget we can.
Yeah, and we're this close because the school budget went down already, a full position, and
Yep.
that's helping too.
Yep. So all around, huge thank you to all of our town offices and all the people who work for us for everything that they do. All right. That's all of our public comment for tonight. I don't see anyone online. We don't have an executive session tonight. Our next regular meeting will be next Monday, March 31st, and that will be just a select board meeting. And then as discussed, our next finance committee and select board meeting will be April 7th, the following Monday. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 3-0, 8:09 p.m.